Okay, thank you again for joining us today for an info session on the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. I'm Dr. Matthew Plooster with the Graduate School, and also the Graduate Fellowship Advisor for the University of Utah. Down here at the bottom of our page are some links: nsf-grfp.utah.edu. That's the used GRFP website where you can refer back to this video and other application resources, as well as upcoming workshops and opportunities for you to participate more as you apply for this opportunity. And then we have, of course, the National Science Foundation's website for the Graduate Research Fellowship, www.nsf-grfp.org. So what we're going to cover today is, what is the GRFP? What are the benefits that you would receive as a fellow, the eligibility in various STEM fields, which is actually quite broad, application components, what will be required of you as you apply, and some tips and reminders and some frequently asked questions. So what is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship? It's a program that really focuses on you, the talent in our education system, and to help support you as you participate in research and innovation. This is one of the oldest fellowship programs in the United States, particularly with the government. And it does have a pretty strong correlation with success in the field. Numerous college presidents, deans were GRFPs, as it notes here. Several Nobel Prize winners, about 41, 42 U.S. Nobel Prize winners were GRFPs. That's quite a number there, among many other individuals of great success in their chosen field participated in this program. So it does set you apart a bit, adds prestige to your resume, and provides you with additional opportunities to focus on your research and innovation. So the fellowship benefits that you receive as a fellow, this is a 5-year program, and for 3 of those years, you are funded. There's a lot of reasons that it's funded for 3 out of 5, and part of that is, in many graduate programs, you're required to work as a research assistant for a certain part of that time, or you're required to be a teaching assistant for part of that time. That is common in a lot of PhD programs. And so you earn a wage as a TA, for example, so you can choose to get your GRFP funding another year when you're not working, so you can focus on your research at that time. You receive tuition coverage. You should not have to pay a tuition bill when you are GRFP. We through the NSF, do provide career and life balance, such as family and medical leave, which can be paid to a point, and access to other professional development opportunities. If you stay here at the University of Utah for your master's or your PhD as a graduate research fellow, then we will, during those 3 years of funding, we will cover your health insurance, and we will also provide you with a $2,000 a year research expense account for you to use to conduct your research, to purchase equipment that you need for your program, or go to conferences, or travel to your data collection site, or whatever is necessary for you. And also, some faculty advisors offer additional fellowship bonuses. There are some areas of this campus, as well as other universities, where the faculty advisor who invites you into their lab in the admissions process will say, well, here's an extra $2,000-3,000 since you're bringing in your own funding, because it does save them not having to pay your full stipend for all 4 or 5 years of your program. So there can be some additional carrots dangled to have you bring your GRFP to that institution. Some other important benefits of the Graduate Research Fellowship is that this is mobile. You can take this to any PhD or research master's program in the United States. And that's not just when you receive it. We do have students who It's not common, but it does happen where you might get halfway through your PhD and decide, oh, there's this PI at another institution that's going to really focus more on my area of research. I want to study there. And the fellowship goes with you because it is funding for you, not funding for your institution, so to say. This can also occasionally step up in graduate admissions. So there are some cases where we've had students who were waitlisted for a particular program or even denied admission. They call and follow up with that program, say, hey, I just got awarded the NSF-GRFP. And quite often in those situations, it's okay, you're off the wait list, you're in the program. Thanks for coming. This does boost your resume and your CV. It does offer prestige and recognition. And this does establish a pattern of seeking and hopefully getting external funding, which for those of you who are planning a career in full-time research in the professoriate going into higher education for the next 40 years of your career, that is a very, very important skill that you will need and one that will give you a competitive edge when you're on the job market. Eligibility, this is super important as this is a National Science Foundation fellowship. We as the University of Utah have no sway in exceptions to eligibility. So these are very black and white rules here. You must be a United States citizen, national, or permanent resident. You must be a rising senior at the time of application or a first or second year graduate student. Most of you here today are undergrads. So you might be a senior this year going into your first year of grad school this fall. You might be a junior right now and applying for grad school in the fall during your senior year. So as a senior, you have a little bit of an edge here. Otherwise, if you do not meet this criteria of rising senior or first or second year grad student, you must have had at least 2 years, and I do apologize that the slide is off there. You must have had 2 years of a break in education. So let's say you were 2 years into your PhD and then you take 3 years off because life happened for whatever reason, you want to go work in industry, and then you decide to come back because that's more than 2 years consecutive time off. Since your last enrollment, you'd be eligible to apply again. Very importantly, non-traditional students are welcome. Every cycle I get questions about, I'm in my 40s, is this something I even have a competitive edge for? And the answer to that is absolutely, we want you to apply. And more of our students here on this campus who receive the fellowship are non-traditional students. So if this describes you, don't let your non-traditional status deter you. We invite you to please take this opportunity. And you must be enrolled or intend to enroll in a research-based master's or doctorate in an eligible STEM field. So as you are, for the most part, undergraduates here today, this is more of the intention. I intend to be accepted into a biology PhD program or what have you. So I'm going to go through really quickly here the various STEM fields that we have that are eligible. And STEM is a little bit broader than many oftentimes think. So here's chemistry. And I do also want to note here that chemistry or these different fields aren't necessarily the degree program that you are in, but where your intended research will reside. So for example, I have a student who received the award today who is studying genetics, but their research is in genetics, but they're getting a biology degree, and another who's in neuroscience, but in a neuroscience program, but they're studying a biological area. So there's sometimes some differences between the degree program or the department you are in and what you will identify on your application as your area of study. So chemistry, this goes in a lot of different areas: chemical catalyst, chemical measurement and imaging, chemical structure dynamics and mechanism, etc. And you can find the full list of all of these on the solicitation on the NSF's website. Next up, we have computer and information sciences and engineering. And this includes a broad breadth of computer engineering, such as artificial intelligence, communication and information theory, computer security and privacy, computer systems and embedded systems, data mining and information retrieval, data science, etc. In engineering, we now have aeronautical and aerospace engineering, chemical engineering, biomedical engineering, environmental engineering, industrial engineering and operations, research, nuclear engineering, ocean engineering, etc. So a broad breadth there. Geoscience includes artificial intelligence. You'll see artificial intelligence all along here in multiple different discipline areas. So you just identify that in the broader discipline areas such as geoscience or engineering. Atmospheric chemistry, oceanography, geodynamics, geophysics, marine biology, paleoclimate, physical and dynamic meteorology, etc. Life sciences include biochem, cell biology, biophysics, genomics, neuroscience, physiology, structural biology, systems and molecular biology, among others. Materials research, ceramics, chemistry of materials, materials theory, photonic materials, physics of materials, mathematics, analysis, applied math, artificial intelligence as it relates to math, biostatistics, computational statistics, computationally intensive research, geometric analysis, etc. Physics and astronomy, of course, in artificial intelligence, astronomy and astrophysics, atomic, molecular, and optical physics, particle physics, quantum information science, etc. Psychology, cognitive neuroscience, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, personality and individual differences, quantum information science, social and affective neuroscience, social sciences. So this is where things can get a little bit on the broad side here. Anthropology, archaeology, biological anthropology, cultural anthropology, geography, economics, law and social science, linguistics, political science, public policies, sociology, urban and regional planning. Something very important to note here, for example, we have law and social science, and public policy. So if you are conducting a research interest in your PhD program that relates to law and social science, that's great. If you're studying in a JD program, a Juris Doctorate program, or law school, you would not be eligible for this. So law is the area of research, not the degree program. The same thing goes for public policy. This is for a PhD or a Master of Science student who's studying public policy as a science, as opposed to studying a professional degree such as the Master of Public Policy. So there's a little bit of a differentiation there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on that. And then lastly here, STEM education and learning research. So you might be interested in chemistry or biology, but more in the teaching of, or the education of, that is also wonderfully invited here for you to apply for this. So STEM education includes engineering education, math education, science education, technology education, computational intensive research, artificial intelligence, etc. So eligibility, now that we've gone through all the disciplines and who is eligible, who isn't supported? So joint science and professional programs such as JD PhD or MD PhD are not eligible. Business administration or management degrees are not eligible. Counseling, social work, history, with the exception of the history of science, education, except for STEM education, and other professional degrees such as Master of Public Health, Master of Public Administration, Master of Legal Studies, etc. Research within disease-related goals, unless you are in the biomedical realm. Clinical research, which means patient-oriented research, patient outcomes, outcomes research, health services research, epidemiological and medical behavioral studies. Ineligible studies also include pharmacologic, non-pharmacologic, and behavioral interventions for disease or disorder prevention, prophylaxis, diagnosis, therapy, or treatment. So one question that comes up with this disclaimer that comes out of the National Science Foundation solicitation for the GRFP is, well, I'm studying XYZ, and this is going to have an implication on healthcare research or pharmacology. Does that mean I'm not eligible? Not necessarily. If we have two different areas, and we'll talk about this in a bit, called intellectual merit and broader impacts. And of course, when you study something very specifically, there are going to be ripples. So for example, I worked with a student a few months ago who was looking at physiology and dissection. So studying how uses of different study samples can help identify different things, which would have her research focused on how this study of different animals can help, through this new lens, can help save swamps and other natural land out there. But would that have, according to her research, could that have ripple effects into how human disease is studied? Absolutely, but it's not the primary focus. It's a broader impact. So if you do have a research interest that could be impacting medicine or pharmacy or healthcare, but it's not the primary focus, chances are that's going to be a very eligible area. Okay, application components now. We have transcripts, which will be required from all degree granting institutions that you've attended, not just those that you've graduated from. So if you attended a semester of community college and then came here to the University of Utah, that one semester of community college, that transcript needs to be included. Statements, we have two separate. We've got a personal statement and a graduate research plan statement, and letters of reference. Two are required, but it's recommended that you submit 3. You can enter in up to 5 individuals, but only 3 will be accepted. So you can rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just in case someone, for whatever reason, is not able to provide that letter of recommendation. You have another ready to go. As mentioned, transcripts must be from all institutions, including graduate institutions, even if you did not receive a degree. If you are applying in the first semester of a program, so let's say you apply this fall during this upcoming application cycle, and you're going to be a first-year PhD student, wonderful. You do not need to submit an application for that graduate program that you are in, or a transcript for that program that you are in, because there are no grades yet posted. So it's just completed semesters. Personal statement and graduate research plan need to address both the broader impacts and intellectual merit under specific headings. This is a relatively new requirement, the specific headings, where if you do not have a header that says broader impact, intellectual merit, your application would be thrown out. And all this is going to be on the solicitation, and I'll cover this more in depth in future workshops. And you want to develop a consistent theme to weave together your personal story and your academic and career plans. Your personal relevant background and future goals statement, or your personal statement, is a maximum of 3 pages, single-spaced. Tell your story, what motivates or inspires you, what drew your interest into research and the area of research you are pursuing. Show how you've taken initiative and faced challenges, how you've overcome those challenges. Describe your projects, contributions, and your future goals. And again, label intellectual merit and broader impacts. So this is your time to not just talk about, hey, I'm in school and I'm studying biology and I want to learn more about genetics and I plan to research XYZ. Yes, you want to talk about that, but you also want to say, here's why I'm interested in science. Here's the path I've had that has led me here, and here's where I want to go in the future. You want to avoid narratives. This is really important. And years and years of doing application preparation for scholarships, fellowships, and graduate school, I run into this all the time. You want to avoid narratives like, my grandmother died of cancer, so I decided to be a scientist. Instead, you would reframe that into something like, my grandmother's passing of cancer piqued my curiosity into science, which led me to studying chemistry in my undergrad, et cetera, et cetera. So reframing things in a more scholarly way. Another example is, I'm pursuing a career as a scientist because I want to change the world. Especially when I worked with high school students coming into college, they'd always say, well, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. Well, are doctors only people who help people? No, there are teachers, social workers. Arguably, the nurses do most of the work in the hospital, etc. And but why is that the best way for you to help someone? Why is being a physician the best way? So you can reframe this, change the world to, I'm pursuing a career as a scientist in whatever field because it combines my interests with research and innovation with my skills and background in chemistry and physics. So saying that not only do I have the interest in this, but I've got the skills, the background, I've got the academic acumen to be successful here. Okay, now your research plan is a maximum of 2 pages, single-spaced, and both your research plan and your personal statement can include images when necessary. This is where you will describe your research idea. What's your big idea that you want to study? You would include a brief background of what that is, your approach, what methods you plan to use, and what your predictions are. What's your hypothesis at this point as you are conceptualizing this graduate school project? Describe what you expect to learn in that process. Recognize and describe the risk. COVID taught us a lot about this. If something happens, what is your plan B? If you can't get the funding to go and conduct this $30,000 project, what will you do instead? If you can't get the data from whatever your data source is, what will you do instead? So you really want to illustrate a plan B. The NSF readers really like to see, I put thought into this and I recognize that there's an element of risk. And while I'm hoping for the best, I am preparing for what may happen. Evidence of how you think, what your thought process is, and how you come to your conclusions needs to be clear. And where well designed. Your research plan does need to be cohesive, needs to flow well, and needs to be easy to read. And label your research plan's intellectual merit and broader impact under their own header. Now, this is something that you will ideally work with your faculty advisor on. Some of you may have a faculty advisor already as an undergrad who you are working in their lab doing research with. They may be the PI that you wish to work with as a grad student. Fantastic, work with them. You might be in the admission process, applying to other schools or looking at other schools, and you're talking with various faculty about their research and how you're interested in it. They may be an ideal person for you to work with as well on that. So intellectual merit, broader impacts. Intellectual merit is your potential, your project's potential to advance knowledge. Discuss how your proposed research advances knowledge and understanding in your particular field and across other disciplines. So if you're in biology, how could that possibly impact biomedical research or chemistry research? Is there an interdisciplinary aspect to that you want to talk about that? Broader impact is the potential to impact society and contribute to the achievement of specific and desired societal outcomes. This is where you will discuss how your proposed research will benefit your local community. And local community is a broad term there. If you are conducting your research, I have an anthropology student right now who's conducting research in the middle of Egypt, and their broader impacts are not so much on Salt Lake City, but how is this going to impact the local community there where she's doing her research, where she's doing her data collection? How is that going to impact historical preservation there? How is that going to impact potentially tourism and such? And on both of these must be reflected under a specific heading. Hitting that really hard here because, as I tell my advisees, if you do not get a fellowship award, I want it to be because the applicant pool is just so full of really super competitive, amazing applications, not because you forgot a header. So we're going to hit that very hard in the workshops to come. And this is just a brief chart here on intellectual merit and broader impacts. Intellectual merit, when it comes to your personal statement, needs to describe your motivation, ability, research, your experiences in research, preparation, achievements, perseverance, and your future goals, scholarly and professionally. Intellectual merit with your work, which would be reflected in your research plan, is the merit of your work. Describe your topic, your innovation, your rigor, and creativity, the new knowledge your research will create. Your broader impacts in your personal statement will describe your background, your personal story, broadening participation, research, identity, initiative, leadership, communicating science. This is not going to focus just on your narrow research project, but you're going to talk about your leadership experience, your leadership potential. The NSF-GRFP is not funding for your PI's lab. It's not funding for your institution. It is and it's not funding your research. It is funding you who will conduct your research. It's funding you who is learning and growing as a future leader in your chosen area. So this is where you can talk about, I held these leadership positions on campus. I work with this nonprofit as a volunteer and I do XYZ. So it's not just saying I have experience in science. I have experience participating in the community around me, whether it's science related or not. And then broader impacts with your work is, what is the impact of the research that you will be conducting? Describe the foundational nature, relevance, and importance to society and any educational or interdisciplinary connection that your research may have. Okay, some advice on the statements. GRFP is not just for scientists, but future leaders. So you want to talk about how you've exhibited your leadership potential already, how you are a self-starter, and your ability to build community and collaboration around you. That does not have to be specific to science. Be yourself and convey who you are in the narrative. The potential of individual is evaluated, not just the proposed research. And there's absolutely nothing worse as a reader to read an application for an opportunity like this. And it's, oh, I can tell they're writing what they think I want to hear, but they're not being themselves. You want to be yourself because that's what's going to connect the reader to what you are sharing. And use scientific terms, absolutely, but don't be too jargony or overly technical. Reviewers will not be experts in your field. That does need to be stated here very importantly. The reader will not be at your institution. So if you're at the University of Utah, it's probably going to be someone from MIT or Rutgers or elsewhere, someone not here. Additionally, let's say you're biology, you're probably going to be evaluated by a mathematician or a chemist or a physicist, someone who is not in your area of research. So they do evaluate the intellectual merit, but quite a bit is, okay, the research is sound. They've got their methods, they've got their outcomes. This is a really good research plan for a student. So jargon that is really technical in your specific area, really honed in on your research interest, we're not going to know what that is. And it's really a sign of maturity with your applications when you are able to take a complex idea and break it down in layman's terms, that any reader can reasonably understand what you're saying. They might not know the deep down technical, this is how a biologist would do XYZ, but they would get the gist of what you're trying to do. Reference letters are super, super important. And as you may have learned already, especially as you look to grad school, they can be very political. So really take a lot of time with this step. Make sure that you have the right references and that you are taking every consideration into account here. So you will need 2 reference letters. 3 is recommended. You can list up to 5, but only up to 3 will be counted and considered in your application. If you only have 1 or 0, that's an automatic disqualification. You will not be evaluated. References must be from non-family members, but preferably from professors and researchers that are familiar with you as a person and or familiar with you as a student, as a researcher, who's familiar with your work and scholarly capability. If a reference writer is from industry, which some of you may have worked in industry. You might have worked in a lab or a research center, what have you. That's fine to have someone from industry be a reference writer, but you really need to coach them on what the GRFP is and what they need to be talking about to corroborate what you are sharing in your personal statement and your research statement. Because this is not necessarily the letter that you want them to say, hey, they're a good worker, I loved working with them, anyone would be lucky to. Those are nice things, but that's not what the GRFP readers are looking for. Important considerations here. The NSF is funding you, not your research team and not your PI. You need previous research experience to some degree and evidence of research productivity. That is very important. And you also need a strong GPA. If you have a lower GPA, that does not necessarily disqualify you. Let's say you had a rough first year of college. For whatever reason, colleges can be very difficult to transition to, and that might be part of your personal narrative that you share. But then you get into your major, your engineering program, your science program, your political science program, what have you, and your grades really excel because you're focused in on your area. Your reviewers will have your transcripts and they will be able to say that. So if your cumulative overall GPA is not the most stellar, don't let that necessarily deter you. GRFP outreach goals, they attempt to attract a diverse and qualified applicant pool. So with particular attention to students who are attending minority serving institutions, that could be you plan to, as a grad student, you have sometime during your undergrad attended a minority serving institution. That adds to your diverse profile here. If you are from an EPSCoR jurisdiction, which we'll go over that in a sec, and if you're a non-traditional student, these are elements of diversity that anyone who's eligible should absolutely apply. But if you come from this background, this also helps enrich your application. EPSCoR is established program to stimulate competitive research. This is an NSF concept here. It's an initiative to enhance research competitiveness of STEM research in designated states or territories. If you are from or completed undergrad in an EPSCoR jurisdiction, it may be an integral part of your story to discuss, such as how the locale may have impacted your trajectory. And here are the states and territories. So if you're from any of these areas, talk about that. If you studied in Alabama and that, or you grew up in Alabama and that really kind of gave you a certain trajectory that led you to where you are, such as challenges you needed to overcome, for example, you'll want to talk about that and weave that in. And so those areas are Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, U.S. Virgin Islands, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Non-traditional students are encouraged to apply. In your narrative, discuss the why behind returning to school. Why back to school now? Why grad school? Why in that particular area? And what was your motivation to take this step? That's going to be a very important part of your story, and it will likely be a very compelling part there too. Okay, some common weaknesses that we have with applications is an unorganized personal statement that does not tell a clear story. You want your 3 pages of a personal statement to be very thematic and flow easily. A research statement that is unclear, incomplete, or unpolished. Largely, this is too much or too little detail. This is kind of Goldilocks. You want the right balance, just right. Failure to own your research. This is super important. As you talk about your research experience, we sometimes have the inclination to say, well, my PI did this, or I'm working in this faculty's research project and he did this or she did that, or we as a lab did this. That's great, but what was your portion of that? What was your contribution to the big picture here? Talk about that, own it. take ownership of that contribution. That's what we're looking for when we say own your research, because this is not someone else's, this is yours, your contribution. And lacking recognition of research risk. So as we talked about, you want to have that plan B. If you can't go and collect data, can you get existing data from another source? Talk about that. Whatever the risks are associated, you'll want to recognize those, acknowledge them, and discuss your plan B. Dense writing that is difficult to understand or is uninteresting, too much jargon, and failure to address your broader impacts. Generally speaking, our students have a really good grasp on the intellectual merit. I'm creating new knowledge, I'm contributing to this bigger picture of science in whatever particular area in that particular niche, but the broader impacts is where things kind of go off the rails and get forgotten, and you want to pay special attention to that. What you can do now, as an undergrad, you can continue working on any of the research projects that you have been involved in. If you have anything that is outstanding, tie those loose ends. Identify potential reference writers. This is probably going to be a professor from your program, a PI from a research project that you worked on. You want to develop your research question. As an undergraduate who you're still finishing your undergrad degree and you may or may not have started your applications to grad schools, you don't have to have this fleshed out in finite detail, but you do need to be able to articulate what your interest is and a broad sense of the project that you want to conduct. One question that I get from undergrads and grads as they apply for this is, what if something changes? What if I propose this project and I don't do it? What if I go in a different direction, or there's some major nuances that get changed? Will I lose my fellowship? No. Having gone through this and having coached many students on this, I will tell you that once you get into your grad program, something will change. There are going to be some nuances that you adjust, or your interests might move into some slightly different areas. That is normal. That's pretty healthy as you're growing and learning in a new program. Secondly, it's very important that I note here that there is no NSF police that will come to you with their siren on saying, hey, Jane Smith, you proposed XYZ, but you did something slightly different, so give us our fellowship money back. That will not happen. I can guarantee you that. As long as you stay relatively in your area of interest and you work towards that research degree, you will be fine. You can also read the 2022 solicitation on their website. The 2023 version for the upcoming application cycle will be available in June, July, depending on the year, end of June, early July. The biggest change that we have this year is that the stipend increased from $34,000 to $37,000. In my discussion with NSF program officers, I have not heard of any major changes to the structure of the application or any new requirements that need to be addressed in there. Usually they let us know ahead of time, but that may be reflected in the solicitation. And if anything does change, I will be addressing that in future workshops. Make a plan between today and the October deadline. I don't list a specific day deadline, because if you are in life sciences, the deadline is going to be one day period. Engineering panel, it's going to be another day. If it is biomed, it's going to be another day. Psychology, another day. So it's about 2 weeks of deadlines in October. So right now you want to say, okay, let's say October 1st is when I need to have everything submitted, because you want to give yourself a bit of a cushion there, just in case your Wi-Fi goes out. You don't want to be writing that 5 o'clock deadline. So you want everything done by October 1st. Okay, well, what needs to happen before that? I need to have a review here. I need to have rounds of edits here. Most successful applications will go through several drafts. That is okay, that is healthy. You want to have certain, you will want to have your layers of reference determined by this point and by this point. So kind of doing your timeline backwards to where you are right now. And that gives you a plan to work forward to on. Move along any research projects that you have going, so that you can talk about those and include that in your applications. Same with any pending articles. You do not have to have published to apply to this fellowship. You do not have to have published to get this award. It does enrich your application if you do have any articles or presentations that you participated on. So if you have any that are in the works, finish those up. Otherwise, it's not requisite that you have to have that. Thematically organize your personal statement. What is it that you want to share in your personal statement? Something that I do say to all my advisees, whether NSF or elsewhere, your story is your story, and you need to be comfortable with what you are sharing. So if there's some vulnerable pieces of your background that you do not want to share, you do not have to share that. So make sure that as you organize your personal statement, that whatever you talk about of your past and your present and what you hope of the future, it's something that you are okay with other people reading. And then begin drafting your statements early and go through multiple drafts with your faculty mentor and your peers. Now we're going to go into some frequently asked questions, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. How many times can I apply? Undergraduates, there is no restriction on the number of times that you can apply, but keep in mind that you do have to go into your grad program that following fall. So if you're not ready to go to grad school next year, you might want to put this off until next year to apply. But once you are a graduate student, you can apply just once as a first year or once as a second year. If you are in a bachelor's to master's accelerated joint program, you can apply once. The exception to all of this is if you took a significant amount of time of 2 consecutive years or more, then you have another one additional opportunity to apply. I'm graduating soon with my bachelor's degree, but I plan to take a year off. Will the NSF allow me to defer the award? No. Generally, you cannot defer the award. The only exception to this is if you have a medical deferment or a military deferment that is approved by your institution. So if you come here to the University of Utah, but you have a documented medical need to defer the start of your fellowship, you would come and work with me as the coordinating official, and we would work on deferring that. But if it's, I want to go work in industry for a year, or I want to take a gap year and decompress after finishing my bachelor's degree, you will want to hold off on applying until you are ready to go back to school. As I look forward to graduate school, I'd like to concurrently earn an MBA or an MPH or MPP or another degree. Is this allowable? No, you cannot be pursuing a professional non-research degree as an NSF fellow. You can, this is kind of a loophole to that, you can be working on your PhD, finish your fellowship, and then start and then be admitted into that MBA program. That would really add a lot more time to that, but you can lose your fellowship if you are concurrently enrolled in an MBA or professional program and your PhD. Are there citizenship requirements? Yes, and as mentioned earlier, this is black and white, no room for compromise or negotiation. You must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. International students, DACA, not eligible, unfortunately. Can I apply for the GRFP if I'm planning to attend a foreign institution? The big answer is no. If you are planning to enroll at the Sorbonne or the London School of Economics or the University of Ottawa, no, you cannot be admitted and studying at a foreign institution. However, if your research is going to take place in another country, as long as you're enrolled and you're earning your degree from a U.S. institution, that is fine. So if you come here to the University of Utah, but you're going to do your anthropological field work and research in Brazil, perfect. I'm applying as an undergrad, and I'm not sure where I'll be attending grad school next year. Will this be a problem? Not at all. The NSF understands that applicants, particularly you as undergrads, might not have your plans settled and may have admission applications under review. You're not bound at the same time to remain at the same institution throughout the entire period of your fellowship. You can start your PhD at Utah State and then decide to come here to the University of Utah during that PhD and bring your fellowship with you. That's not uncommon, I'll say that. I'm not planning to attend an Ivy League or elite university. Will I have a chance? Absolutely. Absolutely. The NSF values diversity among institutions, programs, and people. Included in this diversity are minority-serving institutions and institutions in obscure territories, which we went over. Today, the National Science Foundation did post the results from the last application cycle. So if you do go to the research.gov website, you can see where the 2,500 awards went to, and you can see it is going to be quite by and largely public institutions, and not all necessarily like the elite public institutions like UCLA, UC Berkeley, etc. So that can give you a really good idea of the diversity of institutions that the NSF really does value, and it is broad and very sincere. I've worked on papers not ready for publication. Will this be a problem? Is it a problem if I don't have any publications? Mentioned this already, it can be helpful to your application, but they are by no means required. Especially as an undergrad applicant, it's understandable that you might not have had publishing opportunities. And it is still absolutely very possible to be awarded the GRFP with no publications at all. I'll just mention this right here. There are 3 tiers of review, and each review step gets a little bit stricter and requires a little bit more out of the applicant. They're going to look at your GPA a little bit more tightly, or they're going to look at, do they have publications and whatnot? And that the strictest level is when you're a second-year grad student. That are going to expect that your research plan is a lot more thought out, much more finite, and much more descriptive. As an undergrad, you have a lot more leeway because you're not yet in grad school. You might not have had the opportunities that a second-year grad student would have. So especially right now as undergrads, do not let publishing bog you down. I'm an undergrad and I've worked in a research lab outside of my program. Can the PI write a letter of recommendation? Absolutely 100%. You want individuals who are familiar with your scholarly and research background. And this, especially with how colleges are sometimes structured, this could very easily be a PI outside, a professor outside of your academic department, or even the college at your university. Here at the University of Utah, for example, by and large, so many of our biomedical engineering students are working in labs in the School of Medicine, not in the College of Engineering. That's perfectly normal, and those faculty members are more than allowed to write a letter of recommendation, and that's 100% okay. When are applications due? They are due in October. When will applicants be notified? Officially by in the beginning of April, but for the last several years, it's generally been the last couple of days of March when those announcements have been made. The 2022 application was announced today on the 29th of March. Okay, so some upcoming programming for you to look forward to. Early summer, so late May, early June, I will have an application preparation series where we will spend an hour to talk about research plans, an hour to talk about personal statements, etc. Late June, early August, that's when the application portal will open and you can go in, create your profile, start adding the various elements, uploading your statements when they're done. So you can get everything ready to go before you hit submit. You don't have to submit the day you open up the portal. Throughout the fall, I will be hosting several different writing workshops, which will be kind of a come and go, come bring your draft, let's take a look at it. You know, me, another writing, another fellowship professional or professor, or your peers will go through your statements and provide you with some constructive feedback, as well as answering questions that you have. So it's not going to be a structured presentation, but more of a come and let's work on our projects together. And then in October, application submission deadlines are due. At the same time, I do offer advising. So if you want to meet with someone one-on-one to talk about your application, you can schedule an appointment with me, fellowships@gradschool.utah.edu. And we can get an appointment scheduled to talk about your drafts or talk about your application potential or answering questions that you do have. And with that, that is our application. This recording will be on our website, NSF-GRFP.utah.edu. And as I finish up the presentation, this is your time. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself or you can type it into the chat box. And I will stay on for as long as necessary to answer your questions. Okay, and with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording in case anyone does not want their question on the recording. And I do see a question came into the chat